All right.
We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome, baseball community. Coach Bo here with you. Pumped up to be here for episode 230. Baseball is in full swing in a lot of areas. It's ramping up. It's getting close for those areas where the weather's a little colder. So it's definitely an extra awesome time for the youth baseball community. I'll tell you what, being a coach is not easy. Being a coach at any level is not easy. At the higher up levels, there's a ton of layers of complexity and issues that come up. But at the youth level, it's still very difficult in so many ways. And being a good coach is not easy. Being a good coach takes more work than being a bad coach. But being a bad coach comes with a lot more headaches, missed opportunities, and just environments that are not fun and bad experiences for everyone involved. Coaching's not easy. Parenting is not easy. And anybody who says otherwise, that might be a red flag that they're not putting in the work, the effort that it takes. Good coaches, even great coaches, make their fair share of mistakes. We all make mistakes. And so like Babe Ruth once said something to the effect of, I'm not going to let the fear of striking out get in the way of me hitting more home runs. Now I'm paraphrasing, but as coaches, we can't get too down when we don't have a great practice as a coach or when we're struggling. Keep your head up. You got this. Even the good and great coaches make their fair share of mistakes. So we have to find that balance of pushing ourselves, but not being overly hard on ourselves. Finding that balance, challenging ourselves to get better each practice, but knowing not every step we take is going to be a forward step. We're going to take some steps back from time to time, and that's all part of the journey. It's not about being a perfect coach. It's about being a better coach as we move forward. And the same thing goes for being a parent of youth athletes. And one recommendation I make is after a game or after a practice, we should reflect on how we handled things. We should assess 2 or 3 key situations that came up and our response, or if it was something that we did proactively, assess how the message came across, how the action came across. And we shouldn't beat ourselves up, but we should take an honest look and say, could I have done this better? And what will I do next time this happens or at the next practice to be better? Just going out there as a coach and volunteering your time as a coach or being a parent that's involved, that's something right there to be very proud of and for us to hang our hat on. It is a great way to give back to our community, to our family. It's a great opportunity to spend time with our own kid or kids and to help positively impact the kids in the community. Going out there as a youth coach with a positive attitude, giving a lot of praise, having an organized plan, trying your best to make sure each player enjoys showing up to each practice, at least with regard to the things that are within our control as coaches, that those players also enjoy or look forward to the next game. Once we accomplish those things, we're playing with house money. So let's make sure that we're not too hard on ourselves, coaches, while still continuing to push ourselves to be better each and every time we step out on the field. A simple recipe is have a practice plan, have a game plan, have 3 or fewer coaching habits that we're working on at any one given time. Ideally, the 80-20 rule applies here. And keep the kids safe. From there, we can start adding the icing to the cake. We can start putting the gravy on the biscuit, all right? So being a good coach is more work. Being a bad coach comes with more headache, more regret, and just an overall worse environment for everyone involved. By showing up here and by building your knowledge base of coaching about baseball and leadership, that gives us more confidence each time we go out to the field. And having that confidence is a great thing. It's a great feeling having more confidence. But we'll never have all the answers or be fully prepared to hit the target 100% of the time. There will be things that come up. There will be situations that arise throughout the season. And I think it goes back and I think originates or goes back to that start with calmness. I found myself this weekend coaching a game for my kid, and I felt myself getting a little bit away from that calmness. And here I've been coaching 20 plus years. After the game, I reflected on some things, and then I set forth a game plan for next week. And just like any good habit, it's not always a straight line to improvement. Now, before we jump into talking about Coach Hurley and the best angles to record video from, and leading metrics and lagging metrics. In other words, statistics and then the actions, the inputs that go into yielding those statistics. Before we get into that, I want to remind you to head over to 8020baseball.com, get the free drill design guide. That drill design guide, it's about a 20-minute read, and whether you're new to building out drills or you have a lot of experience building out drills, I know you'll get something out of it. And the idea of that drill design guide is to share with you all the different parts that make a drill great or optimal or effective. Not that we're going out there and making perfect drills, but I'll tell you what, a bunch of good drills stacked together in a practice, a massive benefit for your players and your team versus the alternative of having one great drill sandwiched in with or mixed in with a group of mediocre drills. And by going over there and reading that drill design guide that you can get for free, at least you'll have the directions, the GPS to show you the path to designing great training drills, training environments. And I wrote it so it's applicable in all different environments, different situations, different amounts of players, different types of equipment. I tried to take those variables out when I put it together. So go over, get the drill design guide. Quite a few coaches have been getting that recently, and creating great training drills has a big impact on the practice environment. Not just the practice environment, but of course, getting our players' skills better, faster, better leveraging the game to teach and coach up our players. So Coach Hurley, Coach Dan Hurley of UConn, they just won, as many of you know, the NCAA men's basketball championship, back-to-back champions, first time that had been done in almost 20 years. That's really hard to win back-to-back for two obvious reasons, right? One, all the other teams saw your recipe. They saw your strategies the first time around. They got video of everything that you've used or that you used to win a championship. So there's very few things you can use to surprise other teams. And then, of course, teams are going to show up and bring their A game more often, or it's likely they're going to bring their A game more often because you're the champ. And so Coach Dan Hurley and his team, UConn, University of Connecticut, won the championship. Now, I got in a NCAA bracket for the first time in many years with all my buddies that I grew up with. And now while I finished 5th out of 12, I did have UConn winning the championship. Now, while the other picks weren't the best, I thought UConn was a pretty safe bet because of their coach. Now, those of you that aren't familiar with Coach Dan Hurley, 3 years ago, in episode 79, titled "The Number One Reason Youth Baseball Players Lose Interest, a Lesson from Elon Musk, and How Hall of Fame coach Bob Hurley won 26 state championships and molded his players into better people." That was the title of the episode 3 years ago. So that goes back a year before Dan Hurley and UConn won their first championship. About 15 years ago, I was coaching with a guy. He was a younger guy, just starting to coach, just got done playing college ball. And he brought this book with him to practice, and he was reading it before practice. And the book was called The Miracle at St. Anthony's. Some of you are familiar with that book. I highly recommend it. And it's about Bob Hurley and his basketball teams. And in this particular case, they focused on one season, but it dove into more than just that one season. So I got the book, read it, and what stood out to me was Coach Hurley was really, really, really good at the big needle movers. 3 things that really stood out. So this is basketball, but while the big needle movers are different in each sport somewhat, the idea is that he really hammered home on the 80-20 rule, the 80-20 principle. His teams were always in better shape than the other teams, and he perfected the full court press. He would spend an absurd amount of time just perfecting the full court press on defense with his team. They played hard and they made their free throws, especially under pressure. So his team was in better shape, they had a better defense, and they were better at the line than pretty much every team they ran up against. And that was the recipe. That was the bulk of the recipe that led Coach Bob Hurley, Dan Hurley's dad, Bobby Hurley's dad, Bobby Hurley, the old Duke point guard, who I believe is coaching at Arizona State these days. And that's what led Coach Bob Hurley Sr. to, I think, may be the most state championships won by any high school coach ever. If not, it's got to be right up at the top. I couldn't imagine a coach winning more than 26 state championships. I mean, just coaching for 26 years in and of itself is a big deal. So I brought this up as coaches. I know we coach baseball and this is basketball, but in a lot of ways, coaching is coaching. And this is something that just happened recently. Now, while some might think Coach Hurley comes across as a little over the top authoritarian, he's dealing with college players. So some of the strategies and methods wouldn't necessarily be suitable for youth sports. But we could use a diluted version of those methods. The discipline for an 8-year-old baseball team, it's not going to be as strict and as stern as it would be for a group of college basketball players or college athletes. And that goes without saying. But one thing that stood out about Bob Hurley and Dan Hurley, Bob Hurley Sr., the dad, and Dan Hurley, the son, was how they made sure they coached up the big needle movers. And they don't allocate their practice time, and they didn't allocate their practice time equally across all things. Very lopsided with their practice time allocation. So keep this in mind. I see this with a lot of coaches. They allocate practice time equally across all things, all skills, all plays. And I would warn against that approach for the most part. I'm not saying that shouldn't be used at all, but there are big needle movers and small needle movers. And I think we should allocate our time appropriately and accordingly. So this segment of the podcast was just as much, I guess, about Bob Hurley Sr. as it was Dan Hurley, in that they are very similar, of course. It makes sense, right? In that they focus on the big needle movers. They have a disciplined team, a high hustle team. So youth coaches, allocate that practice time according to the impact it's going to have on skill development and the impact it's going to have when the games roll around on Saturday. Now, I'll finish with tying Dan Hurley, Coach Hurley's offensive approach into what we talk about with our hitting approach, our hitting plan. And Coach Dan Hurley is a huge proponent and coaches up his offense, his players, in a big-time way to create good shots, create open shots. And from what I've gathered, he preaches this much more heavily than most coaches, creating good shots on offense, waiting for a good shot, taking advantage of good shots. The priority is getting a good, clean, clear shot. Now, that's not always going to happen, but the high emphasis, the large emphasis on getting a good shot is just like the huge emphasis, the large emphasis we should use when coaching up our hitters, when coaching up our batters. We should, at the youth level, hammer home the message of get a good pitch to hit. Get a good pitch to hit with less than 2 strikes and be on time. Be on time and get a good pitch to hit. Now, if you have coach pitch or machine pitch, this still comes into play because coaches don't always throw great pitches and machines don't always throw great pitches with less than 2 strikes in that less than 2 strike approach. So we want to optimize our chance of success by swinging at good pitches with less than 2 strikes. We want to optimize that. We really want to fine tune and hone in that skill, that pitch selection, that swing decision. So if you get good shots in basketball and you emphasize creating good shots, of course, you're much more likely to make your shots. It's a much higher percentage move. And the same thing for hitters. Like Ted Williams said, the number one thing hitters got to do is swing at a good pitch. Now with 2 strikes, that changes because now the pitcher and the umpire call the shots. But with less than 2 strikes, get a good pitch to hit, just like a good offense in basketball is striving really hard to create open shots. So I like to tie in the podcast and coaching baseball with current events, and good coaching is good coaching. I do recommend reading The Miracle at St. Anthony's, Bob Hurley Sr. And he coached high school, so he had players that were 15 years old, 16, 17, 18. Probably had some 14-year-olds, those freshman kids coming in, working with them. So his players weren't that much older than some of the players a lot of you are working with in that middle school range. And if you haven't listened to episode 79 of this podcast, go back after you listen to this episode and we dive into Bob Hurley Sr. and his coaching strategies. I got a quick hitting tip for you. The best angle to record video that you'll use to analyze, or if you give it to a coach to analyze, the best angles, the 2 best angles to record video from of a hitter and a pitcher are from directly from the side, the open side. So for a left-handed pitcher, for example, getting video from behind first base in that area as straight on to perpendicular as possible. For right-handed pitchers, one of the 2 key angles is going to be from behind third base. Essentially, it's a line between yourself, third base, and the mound. Now, hitting's a little tougher because the dugout usually comes into play a little bit more, but you want to have that open side so you can see the front of their jersey, you can see their hands, and you want to go straight from the side. And then for both hitters and pitchers, the next angle that you want to record video from, and I think it's important to get both, from the open side, a direct view of the open side. The reason it should be straight on is so it gives you solid reference points of, are they ahead? Are they drifting? Are they leaning too far back? Are they moving forward too much? Where's their balance at? And if you're looking straight from the side, you're going to see that shift in balance. You're going to see the distribution of their balance, where their head is relative to their lower half, where their hands are relative to other things, their shoulders, spine, and torso angle. You'll have a much better way to assess that if it's straight on from the side, because you start getting off on these angles and it starts messing with the perception of where things are a little bit. Now, you can still do it, but ideally, it's straight on from the open side for both pitchers and hitters, and then straight from behind home plate. Or if you can zoom in from behind center field, if you have a good camera, straight out in center field, zooming in. Typically, that's a little bit too far. Cameras, it's going to be a little grainy, shadows. It's tough to see. So you have your angle straight on from the side, from the open side. Then right behind home plate would be the second best bet. You get some challenges here. Sometimes fields have things behind them, a storage shed, a snack bar. But more often than not, it's open back there. But that still leaves one challenge that you have to work through, and that is the umpire and the catcher. So if you can elevate yourself a little bit, that would be ideal. Maybe get a selfie stick. So the two best angles to record hitters and pitchers are from straight on from the open side. So for right-handed hitters, that would be the first base side. For left-handed pitchers, that would be the first base side. For right-handed pitchers, it'd be the third base side. And left-handed hitters, it would be the third base side as well. And then the next best would be directly behind home plate. So you can see where hitters are lined up, where they're striding, their torso angle, how much plate coverage they have, their bat, where it is at point of contact. For pitchers, this is huge, being able to see the stride angle, the front side, the glove, the finish, especially that stride angle. Is their foot striding towards the target, the catcher's glove, or are they closed off or really open? And that you'll see really well from straight in front. Again, you got to work around the umpire and the catcher here, but it can be done. And if there's bleachers behind home plate, makes it even easier because you just sit up on the top, zoom in a little bit. Those are the two best angles when you're recording to get a better perspective of things, balance, stride direction, angles. And if you ever share video with a pitching or hitting coach, they may not ask you to get that angle. They may just say, hey, can you get some video and send it to me? Send it from those two angles, unless they stipulate they like it from a certain angle besides that. But I've analyzed video of no less than 2,000 pitchers and no less than 3,000 to 4,000 hitters. When the first iPad came out, I had the iPad in the bullpen using it for video analysis. And now you see bullpens, high school bullpens, definitely college and pro bullpens, where they have the TVs up, the monitors up for the players to see right after they throw a pitch, showing pitchers instant feedback or quick feedback of their delivery. I've tried different angles over the years, a lot of different angles, and those two end up being the best. So straight on from the open side and straight from behind home plate, working through some of those obstacles that play up, like the umpire and the catcher. All right, so I want to apologize. I recommended reading that Daily Dad email, recommended getting that newsletter. It's a daily email that comes Monday through Friday, although they send one on Saturday. It's like a recap, but essentially it's 5 days a week. And I've recommended it, and I even got into it last episode. I read one out. And last Tuesday, when that episode was published, last week when we talked about it, it was the first time I read something from that Daily Dad that I thought related a lot to coaching, being a leader, being a father, being a parent. And the very next Daily Dad email I got was something that I couldn't have disagreed with more. And essentially the premise was, let the kids choose whatever they want to read. It had to do with kind of the library thing, and I don't want to dive into it too much here, but it was essentially saying like, hey, kids should just be able to read whatever they want. And that'd be like saying, hey, your kids should have access to any movie they want. There's a reason there's ratings on movies. There's a reason that we have age-appropriate levels on books. And I was really disappointed because I make a big push to say, hey, you should get that. And of course, the very next one is the first one that I was in disagreement with. And not just disagreed with, I thought it was actually not even on topic. I thought it was more of kind of a political thing. And I thought to myself, oh man, people are probably going to read it right now. Maybe they wouldn't sign up for it. Some of you listeners are like, man, Coach Bo, what is going on? Yeah, so I don't know what got into the author on that, Ryan Holiday. He's written those books like Ego is the Enemy. He's written some good books. The Obstacle is the Way, books that have been talked about a lot. And he usually stays the course with the Daily Dad email newsletter. And this one, I think it came from a different place. So I apologize. That's usually not how they are. And I think he might have just woke up on the wrong side of the bed and turned it into a rant versus a helpful parenting tip. So anyways, I just wanted to say, trust me, it hasn't been like that for the past year. That was the first one. If you did go and check it out and you thought, Coach Bo, what is going on? This isn't what you made it sound like it was. It normally isn't. It's usually a great message, recalibrates us, that sets our mindset for the day, that can help us be better parents, better coaches, better leaders of young people. So the irony of that. So anyways, it is what it is. I guess we'll treat it like baseball, right? That was strike one. And if it starts going down that path, then y'all can decide for yourself. For those of you that went and took my recommendation to sign up for that Daily Dad newsletter email, I have no affiliation with any of that. I just came across it a little over a year ago and really like it. But if it starts going down a different path, I know for myself, then I'll have to reassess and allocate my reading time somewhere else. Now let's finish up with a segment titled Leading Metrics and Lagging Metrics. So batting average and ERA and on-base percentage and fielding percentage are all lagging metrics. They're all stats that came after the fact. And so I want to discuss briefly about using statistics and how they can be used to help move us forward, but it's important that we don't get stuck on the statistics and over discuss the statistics. This is something that really happens a lot in the baseball community and in the sports world. For instance, if we were to ask 1,000 baseball coaches whether a player with a batting average of over 300 is a good hitter. Now, I'm not a big fan of batting average because it's two massive flaws, but I'm going to use batting average here so we're all coming from the same angle of understanding. So if we were to ask 1,000 baseball coaches whether a player with a batting average of over 300 is a good hitter or not, I think we'd be safe to assume that almost all 1,000 of those baseball coaches would agree. Let's assume they didn't start asking more questions about on-base percentage and slugging and things like that. Let's just assume that we just go off the fact that, hey, batting average is the end-all be-all stat in this case. Of course, we know it's not, but I think it would be safe to say that, yeah, all 1,000 baseball coaches, if we asked that, would probably say, yeah, a hitter batting over 300 is a good hitter. But if we asked those same 1,000 baseball coaches to share with us their thoughts, to tell us the specific things that the hitter is doing to achieve that batting average, how many different answers would we get? If we were to have them prioritize, say, the top 3 actions that the hitter takes to achieve that batting average of 325, if we asked those 1,000 coaches, who let's say all agreed that the hitter batting 325 is a good hitter, assuming we're deep into the season and there's a big sample size of at-bats, if we were to ask those 1,000 baseball coaches whether that 325 hitter was a good hitter or not, we'd probably get 1,000 coaches say yeah. But then if we were to ask those 1,000 coaches to prioritize, to give us a list of the top 3 actions or the top 4 or 5 actions that the hitter is taking to achieve those results, the things they're doing, the process, if we were to have them describe the process, to prioritize and allocate a value of importance to each step in their process, the hitting process, the things that hitter is doing, we'd probably get a lot of different answers, a wide variety of answers. And now there's a good reason for this, and this happens everywhere in life, right? Monday morning quarterback. Everybody can tell you a quarterback had a bad game when they throw 3 picks and they completed 37% of their passes. But the real skill in assessment is understanding what led to that. What was the root cause? So statistics in baseball, lagging metrics, numbers that are quantifying the results can be useful, of course, and we should use them. What I'm saying is that we shouldn't get overly focused on them. We should use them simply as a compass, but we're not going to stare at the compass. We're going to use the compass and then look up, walk the path, and then check the compass later. Same with the GPS in a car. When we have our GPS on, we're not staring at the phone screen and counting down the miles until the next turn. We're watching the road in front of us. And that's how we should use statistics. Look down every once in a while to gauge how we're doing, to get an idea of how we're doing, if we're on the right path or not, but then really focus on the process. Now, if the results are bad, we look at the process and we look to adjust the process. If the results are good, we try to figure out what part of the process is going well. And so if the results start to get worse, then we can look back and say, what changed from that time when the hitter was doing well or the pitcher was doing well? It kind of goes back to video. It's good to videotape pitchers when they're doing really well or hitters when they're doing really well, to compare it with video when they're struggling and see if there's something different, to see what the difference is. That's always a good thing. We should videotape players when they're doing really well to compare and contrast against those times they're not doing well. So in other words, you might videotape a player, one of your kids, or your kid when they're doing well, hitting or pitching, and you just save it somewhere. You just save it for another time. Maybe you save it in the file on the cloud titled good outings or good at-bats. And when there's that inevitable slump, preferably a prolonged slump or 2 or 3 outings of pitching that aren't great, you go back and you put them side by side and see if there's any differences. So to wrap up that segment, statistics are good, but they're lagging metrics. They're after the fact. And we must use statistics only as the starting point, but not the ending point. They're the starting point. They're the starting line. Even though they come after, they're actually the start of our assessment. Use it to draw a line back or to connect the dots back to where the root cause of success or the root cause of failure started, and then we can coach that up. All right. Always great to be here. I hope you're getting a lot out of this. I try to bring my A game for all of you each week. Appreciate all the emails and the positive feedback, and it's great to see the numbers of listeners growing. Thank you so much. If you wouldn't mind leaving a review or a rating to support this podcast, that would go a long ways. And until next week, let's take care of our families, our close friends, our health, and let's take this information out to the field and let's put it into play. Let's not strike out looking. Let's put it into play, test it out. Coaching's not easy. But by being a coach, you're doing a great thing. We should be proud of ourselves for being coaches. It's not easy. We're never going to be perfect, but you'll be closer to being better by taking this stuff out there and using it on the field. All right, everyone, take care. Until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.